This is the last of the four-part series. We started this series on Deciphering China in September, and we had one program every month, the four-part series, and I must credit Mr. Pratap Heblikar for being the key catalyst to drive this along. And of course, we had great support from Commodore Vasan of the Chennai Center for China Studies and his team. And without their support, we would not have been able to host these programs over these months. The first program in September was a sort of curtain raiser, which looked at various issues relating to China, which included, of course, the media as well, but it was a very small capsule. The second program looked at cyber security and cyber capabilities of China and how India could counter them. We had a crack security, a cyber security team based in Bombay, Singapore, and Bangalore, who sort of shepherded that program very well. And of course, last month we had the one that focused on maritime security, the maritime context, as we called it. It was a two-day program which went off very well. And so now we are back to the media game again, and this we thought would be interesting, especially for those who are covering issues related to China. And I'm really happy that we've had a very good day of deliberation so far. I think it started with Ambassador Bambawale, who was also very agreeable to take questions, and that sort of enlivened the whole program. Let us get this going. I know it's lunchtime, it's 1:10, but somehow we've managed to come back to time. For those of you who don't know Mr. Raghavan Srinivasan, I'm sure there are very few here at least who don't. He retired in August this year as the editor of the Hindu Business Line. And there, of course, his focus, he says, was on building alternate revenue streams and a digital future for the product. He, of course, conceptualized some major event properties, which included the Change Maker Awards, the Hindu Business Line Agri Summit, etc. All that was done to bring in revenues. He also created a special line of publications and books, including creating a Tamil subsite. So a very successful tenure. But of course, I've known Mr. Srinivasan several years ago, but what he is now and what he has been for many years over time, he is better known as a senior business journalist and columnist who has been reporting, analyzing, and interpreting the India growth story since the inception of economic reforms in India, which goes back to 1990s or so, early 1990s. And even prior to the start of reforms, Mr. Srinivasan was one of the pioneers of what is called corporate journalism in India, bringing first-hand experience and insight to reporting on Indian businesses ever since he switched to journalism after a decade-long stint in marketing in major corporates. I think that experience would have helped him with the Hindu Business Line. He's also been an investigative journalism, which a few of us might know. He was responsible for breaking major stories, including those relating to the Harshad Mehta stock scam, the return of Coke to India, and the collapse of UTI, among others. Mr. Srinivasan has a good understanding of the digital transformation of legacy newsrooms. I think all of you know what legacy newsrooms mean, you know. Having moved to the business line into subscription-based digital offering for both website and e-paper, and piloting a unique hybrid wall. Now we are talking about hybrid because even events are now going to be hybrid. We're going to have virtual events, and we might have, if we get the vaccine on time and we're all safe, we might have the old-fashioned events, but it is going to be hybrid from now on. Over the past 3 decades, Mr. Srinivasan has led editions and held senior editorial positions in major newsrooms across India. including the Times of India, the Indian Express, the Hindustan Times, Mail Today, the Financial Express. I think that was where I met him first many years ago, and the Business Standard. And he's been managing teams ranging from a handful to several hundred in number in diversified settings and cultures. He has also launched editions of the Times of India in Hyderabad and Pune, and has been a part of the launch teams of the Hindustan Times in Bombay and Mail Today. He carries a deep insight into political issues at the granular level across India. As some of us must have surely noted by some of his comments or questions early on to the ambassador. One of Mr. Srinivasan's other areas of interest is to engage with students of journalism through interactions and guest lectures. I remember him coming to the Bharat Vidya Bhavan where I was lecturing at one point in the early 90s, and he readily agreed to come and speak to the students there. He has worked on developing a business journalism course for the Asian College of Journalism in association with Bloomberg and Mint. He was also scholar in residence at Christ University, Bangalore, running classes and seminars for students and faculty in journalism, management, and the international studies departments. So it's a pleasure having you, Mr. Srinivasan. I'm really happy you're here. Over to you. You can chair the session. Just unmute yourself, please.
Thank you very much, Sashi, for that extensive introduction. Since we've been discussing a lot about propaganda and misinformation, I must tell you that I wrote that introduction myself. So you should take it with more than a pinch of salt. Anyhow, thank you for staying with us through, of course, a very interesting at a long morning's program for the final session today. I am delighted to have an extremely erudite and expert panel for you here. I would like to first introduce Colonel Hariharan. He served as a military intelligence specialist on South Asia, as well as terrorism and counterinsurgency for most of his nearly 3 decades of military service. And operationally, he's been involved with the India-Pakistan wars in Kutch in 65, East Pakistan, now Bangladesh in 1971, and counterinsurgency operations in Assam, Manipur, Mizoram, Nagaland, Tripura, and Bangladesh. And he was the head of the intelligence of the IPKF in Sri Lanka in 1987 to 1990. He's a recipient of the Visish Seva Medal. And post his retirement from the army in 1991, he's served as the executive director of the Madras Management Association, Chennai. He's associated with the Chennai Center for China Studies, the South Asia Security Analysis Group, and the International Law and Strategic Analysis Institute, Chennai. So strategic analyst of global repute, I may say. Welcome, Colonel Hariharan. Our other speaker is Lieutenant General Bajwa, who's the editor of the Indian Defense Review. He superannuated after 39 years in the army. He served in most of the country's border areas and in counter-terrorist operations in Jammu and Kashmir. He was Chief of Staff, Eastern Command. He's been Commandant of the OTA in Chennai and later of the Infantry School in Mhao before taking over as the DG Infantry at Army Headquarters. He's a recipient of the Param Visish Seva Medal, Uttam Yudh Seva Medal, and Sena Medal. He has a postgraduate degree in Defense Studies with an MPhil in Defense and Management Studies and a doctorate in Defense and Strategic Studies. All this besides being a full-time soldier. Quite incredible. And he's the author of 3 books: Modernization of the PLA, Modernization of Chinese PLA, From Mass Militia to Force Projection, and India's Security and Regional Geopolitical Imperatives. Professor Chengappa, you already know, he just chaired the previous session. He also happens to be an old friend, a former colleague as well in a couple of places. and one who very successfully made the transition from journalism to hardcore academics. He after a good long stint in journalism, he went and did further research work, got his doctorate, worked as a research scholar, um, with the IDSA. Um, has and then finally he's been teaching at Christ University as associate professor teaching international relations strategy and strategic studies. Um but he's always continued to write. And he's also the author of two books, India China Relations Post Conflict Phase to the Post Cold War Period, and Pakistan, Army, Islam, and Foreign Policy. Uh, Mrs. Satyamurthy is
Uh,
also, yeah,
Mr. Srinivasan,
yeah.
Mr. Satyavurthy says he's having some breathing difficulty, so he may not be able to join.
All right.
So, yeah, so we will
Okay.
have this, and maybe we can have a Komodo Vasan or someone else later if you need.
All right.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
So the question, we looked at specifically in this today's session, we've looked at the issue of the media landscape in within the context and the prism of the India-China relationships, and I think the session title is a very logical question to ask. So where do we go from here? What do we do next? Um, just to set the context of how China is viewed in newsrooms and in news organizations, just as background information. Um, it is that even today, I mean, despite the noise level going up considerably, particularly in the electronic media television, post the border, tension escalation, China remains pretty much really below the radar in terms of regular focus, editorial focus in most Indian newsrooms. We are far more Western oriented, um, and of course, intensely focused on Pakistan, but China much less so. There is a lack of expertise, which is quite significant within most Indian media organizations as far as China is concerned. Uh, More importantly, Indian media has, particularly over the last 2 decades or so, increasingly turned its focus inwards. I think the Hindu group is one of the few honorable exceptions which has tried to maintain a presence of its own correspondents internationally. But most major media organizations now no longer bother sending their own foreign correspondents. The foreign correspondent as a species is nearly extinct, the Indian foreign correspondent. And they rely on other, exchange arrangements with other organizations from the various countries or stringer ships and so on. So, there is no sustained focus. There is a severe lack of internal expertise, and there is a considerable lack of interest overall in doing sustained reporting on China. So what we do is dip in and out whenever there is an escalation or a spike in interest in some area, whether it is economic or whether it is military or political or strategic. Uh, COVID-19, of course, caused another spike in this thing, but it's very superficial. It's sort of helicoptering in and out, and that is something which I think, as a strategy, as a country, now we need to look at. We need to look at how do we sort of get a better understanding of China as a country. More importantly, how do we sort of ensure that, because media is absolutely critical in transmitting this perception and ideas and understandings of China to a large mass audience. How do we get them to engage with it? So these are, I think, some of the issues that we need to ponder on going forward. Just by way of some background, I would now like to hand over first to Colonel Hariharan. Right. for your session. I think if we can stick to roughly about 18 minutes each, we should be okay on time. Over to you, sir.
Uh, uh, Firstly, from the morning, we have had very erudite uh, scholars speaking on China and Chinese media. I want to clarify one thing: the media dynamics have changed. I am a guy who qualified in journalism in the 60s, and I can see now there is a world of perceptional difference. So I would like to clarify how, because there is a general acceptance of Chinese media as any other media. Unfortunately, I don't think it is a very correct perception. Uh, as I have said in the slide, you can see the social dynamics have changed over the years, particularly knowledge revolution and the quest for what you call consumerism have taken over, and the ideology is now practically dead. Even though China calls itself a communist country, of course, of Chinese vintage, it has ceased to be uh, what it was originally. So we see its fallout everywhere, even in our what you call all, as I can say, all the holy cows of medias have become ordinary buffaloes, so that somebody invests in the buffalo and milks it. There is a profit model. I'm sorry if I uh, disillusion the hallowed status of media, but this is happening all over. It is not only in China, it is in India, unless you have a business model, as Mr. Srinivasan himself had achieved. You have to be dynamic to run a newspaper and keep pace with this. So this readily accepts processed information, and the multimedia presentations are available. I keep appearing on uh, TV channels, and I have seen generally the short time for you given to the panelists to explain your viewpoint is 10 seconds to 12 seconds on any key issue. In Tamil media, of course, the issues are larger, the polemics are bigger, so they allow me to speak longer. But in the English media, I have seen they want me 12 seconds. So because the focus time itself is very much less of the audience. When I did journalism, I remember in Madras University, I was taught the New York Times survey that the lead sentence, the lead of the story, that is the first sentence, the Americans have found that 6 to 8 words. Beyond that, they don't read the story. If it is more than 10, 12 words, that even in those days it was like that. Now, the very short period only the audience attention can be drawn for any story. So the long stories, the what you call the hallowed editorial writers, they have to come back to the ground. They have to appear on the YouTube or adopt other means. This is what is happening. When we come to uh, Chinese media, earlier I think Tilak and Namrata had given enough background that it is a propaganda machine of the uh, Communist Party, not of the government or China. It is of the Communist Party because it has got historical origins from 52 onwards, when the Xinhua and the CNS came to uh, became news media. It was to carry out the propaganda of the Maoist period. That is how it originated. Next slide, please. Shivani, next one. No, not this one, please. Yeah, this is the one. So the media is part of China's statecraft. Unlike democracies, we need to understand this difference. So let us not equate that Chinese media is free or not. It is immaterial whether it is free or not, because it is propagating Chinese Communist Party's strategic objectives. There should be absolutely no doubt about it. And it is the Xinhua and the China News Service, the two prime agencies, or one is Xinhua is both internal and external. CNS mainly used to focus on overseas Chinese. Now it has graduated uh, across the world, particularly Western world. And both of them have very strong influential links with the so-called free world media. It is not that they exist in vacuum. They're all, you can see, Xinhua operates 170 foreign bureaus, and in every province and every, what do you call, city-state, they have a representative office, and in every, what you call, autonomous region, they have. So they carry out the propaganda as news. Forget about global times. Even China Daily, or I read the PLA Daily, and the comments in PLA Daily, or the military news English, they focus on uh, force projection of a Chinese point of view. Every photograph that appears, for instance, in PLA Daily, is to project China as a very powerful power. We do not do that because we are a democratic country. I doubt very much there is no equivalent of state media like Doordarshan doing this kind of thing, because it is not done in the way it is done in China. Or take BBC. BBC was conceived in 1932 by a royal charter, and BBC, a tax is collected from every British citizen, a television tax. That is the source of public finance. Of course, they have got into a corporate model. Overall, BBC is one of the largest, but it is accountable. BBC's accounts, you can access it. Even I access BBC's accounts, public accounts. It is, questions are asked in Parliament. Till 1980, BBC had a link with the MI5, because MI5 is there, like our IB, Intelligence Bureau. Internal vetting of BBC staff appointment was done. It had a role like China is controlling. But in 1980, it was given up when the issue was raised. So, BBC is a very big, it has built its own empire. It employs 32,000 people. But it is qualitatively different from Xinhua. They will even question government policy, BBC. Can you imagine Xinhua doing it? Because it is party driven, not because it is state driven. So this is one point we should not forget, because it is Chinese offer very attractive. I have been to China also, attended conferences, and so I am aware how they want to project China, and many of us, particularly from the media, we find it very convenient because everything is packaged very well, a perspective. And take social media. Social media is fully As a matter of fact, in China, every IT company, whether private or public company, has to uh, help the government in monitoring or giving a feedback to the government requirements to meet the intelligence requirements. Here also they do it, we do it. I have been a MI man. I had access to media in very much, but it was done not on a demand or a threat, because I had established good rapport personally, and with that, it was an informal arrangement. So we have to, when we talk of China, the or Tibet, the moment I mention Tibet in an article, I am sure somewhere a bell rings, because I get unsolicited mail in Chinese, though I don't speak Chinese. I am sure it is because of that. Or Uyghur, I have been always arguing about for a number of years on the human rights of Uyghurs or Xinjiang province. So the actually there are bots which will pick it up in the social media and feed it. So when we talk of handling Chinese media, it is not going to be. I totally agree with Professor Telakja that it is not. It has to be holistic. I am not going to repeat what is in the slide and focus on next one, please. Hello. Yeah. We need to develop a counter-narrative strategy. We have to create an academic base. This counter-narrative strategy, strategy itself is long-term. So it is not going to happen overnight. We have to have an academic base of China studies, which we don't have. It is the think tanks, few departments, 6 universities only offer, actually. 2 universities offer doctoral level studies in Chinese. So we have, there are actually 32, if I remember correct, 32 institutions offering Chinese teaching in the whole country, out of which only 6 universities offer worthwhile degrees. There are not at any time that are not more than 120 to 200 scholars studying in these. Unless we create this base, there won't be, we will not understand Chinese. It is my great regret I didn't study Chinese. And can you please go back to the slide, please?
My apologies, sir. Shivani is having some tech difficulties. I will up the slideshow again for you, sir.
Okay. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So unless we create that base, we will not be able to handle the requirement of trying to pick the best guys to do the job, especially when we come to what media can do. I will focus on this aspect for the simple reason. Then the government communication has to be qualitatively, it has to be multimedia, multimodal, because we are a free country. We don't have a captive audience like we have, and it has to be interactive. We have to graduate to that level. And media has to be taken into confidence. I think earlier also, Mr. Satyamurthy pointed out, and I think Commodore Vasan also pointed out, the public has to get information And media has to be taken into confidence on a regular basis. And you should be able to respond to criticism because we are a democratic society. This is the answer for the China's autocratic way of propaganda. Then you can demolish it because the media will have greater confidence in the government utterance. Then we should respond in real time. This is where I appreciate the Americans. They respond in real time to any Chinese comment, official comment. We are not doing it. Sometimes we don't know what is our stand because there's a contradictory information. And this is, all of us are, to a certain extent, we are informed that how about the ordinary citizen? And it has to be in vernacular. These days, I'm writing in Tamil, my strategic analysis, because I find from the interacting with the Tamil media, so much appalling ignorance. They are following the Chinese media only. So I am saying it must be in multiple languages. Then we have to strengthen technology surveillance. There is no other way. There is overt and covert operations. I am sure especially CNS had been operating like this. CNS is running newspapers in some of the Western countries. And I am sure at least one newspaper has been bought over by Chinese front organizations. I won't be surprised if it happens or if it doesn't happen. It is not a question of loyalty or nationality. It is pure business sense that might drive people to do this. And social media surveillance, already I think there is some strategy afoot. And to identify fake news. Fake news is flooding not only from China, from all over the world. So we have to do this. Next one, please. That is my final slide, and I will end with that. Shivani? Yeah. Indian media has to be drawn into any counter narrative. There is no other go. Let us have faith in our media. They're all as nationalists as we are. They are as loyal to the flag that is flying. So let us not berate the media. Though they are running a business. All of us are running a business of some sort. So the media has to, there is very little knowledge of Chinese. I am talking of the multilingual media. I am not talking specifically of the English media, which has a small layer only it addresses among the Indian audience. There is very little language skill, Chinese language skill. There is very little understanding of developments in China. I think these require running of packages. I would suggest even to Shashi to run this on understanding this for specific language inputs. And op-eds must be realistic, not cut and paste job. I am sorry to say, many guys carry cut and paste or ready-made stuff. You have to have constantly opinion makers, get in touch with them, and let us not be overawed by Chinese claims. They are making all sorts of fantastic claims. You had recently about using what is that microwave gun, making it, that so-called thing has got 80-meter range. I remember General Shankar was saying 80 meters is a long distance when you are sitting on top of a mountain in Ladakh. It means nothing. Still, there was a propaganda, and people were, media fellows were asking me my opinion. The US had developed this a long time back. Then Let us not be totally conditioned by Western world comments. Why do we want certification from the West? This is always, unfortunately, I call it a colonial mindset. How we are doing or what we are doing, why do we need certification from the Western media? We don't need it. We should be what you call, Nehru once said, success comes to those who dare and act. We have to have our say. Let us not be cowed down by what New York Times or WSJ says or this thing. I find we are wasting too much time on commenting on comment. Let us have our narrative very clear, what we want to do. And we have to read more of Chinese media, analysis of Chinese media. There are enough scholars who have fled from China, who are writing in various open source media in Australia and in US, Hong Kong, and in many places. Please read the European media also. And there is no other way. We will come to grips with the media has to do some hard work. With this, I think I have run out of my time. I will close. If there are any questions, I am prepared to handle it. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Hariharan. I think we have two options. We can either take questions for each speaker or all together at the end. I prefer the latter option because it sort of gives the chance to everybody to get a rounded perspective from all the speakers before you actually frame your questions. So I would now like to move on. Thank you, Colonel Hariharan, for a very insightful presentation. I can assure you that all your information on the media is absolutely up to date and current. It's not from the 60s. It's very much the picture which is there today. You see, the one of the big problems with Indian media is and unfortunately that has been driven by the sort of business model practiced by the largest players in the space, has been a very sharp reduction over the years in the kind of investment this make in news gathering, which by news gathering I mean all this put together, developing the expertise, devoting human resources and financial resources, beefing up your own capability with external arrangements and so on. All that is given a secondary this thing. So, if you can manage with a shortcut, you use it, and that's why we are commenting on comments. We are sort of using cut and paste job. It's a sad reality that has taken place because I personally think it's a misinterpretation of what business pressures have meant and what should have been the response in newsrooms and news managements for that. But that's a subject of another debate. Turning to you, sir, General Bajwa, so if you could now take the floor.
Jai Hind, Namaskar, and I think there are a lot who are feeling very hungry. I'll just put on my timer. I'll try to stick to 15 minutes at the most. And Colonel Hariharan has very comprehensively touched upon of what is our shortcomings and where we need to go and where we need to emphasize. I'll talk more towards what the Chinese do and what we are not doing to counter that. The first point came up, everybody really covered it, that you must look at China as not as a country which has got a media which is independent. It's like a political party in India. They all have their own cells. They have their cells which are promoting or propagating or projecting their point of view. And then a political party turns around and says India is Indra and Indra is India. It applies to China. China is a CCPP and CCP is China. And so therefore, everything that is oriented anywhere in China is going to be to project the party point of view, and present the party as the most successful entity in China. And they don't want to take any criticism. So and they're able to do it very well. Of how the outside can be information will never reach a Chinese, and how what the Chinese Communist Party wants to tell the people is what the people will be told. I give an example. When I was part of the China study group, the joint working group and the expert group on the question of the boundary. We often visited China there. They came here. We go to China, you stay in a 5-star, and you see these all the clocks which are showing different standard times of various countries. There is Pakistan standard time, but there is no clock which will show you Indian standard time. You watch CCTV there, the Chinese TV, and they are talking of the Karachi Stock Exchange, but they don't talk of the Indian Stock Exchange. So I asked one local there once. He said, "Where are you from?" I said, "You guess." He said, "You are a Pakistani." They pronounce Pakistan as Pakistani. I said, "No, I am from India." He said, "Oh, you are Hindu." So the Indian information is never reaching them. That is the problem with them. So the Chinese, initially up to 1998, they had a department called the Central Propaganda Department, as Bombay-wala ambassador had also brought out. It was changed to the Central Publicity Department. In India, we don't have any such equivalents. There is supposed to be a propaganda cell with the Ministry of Home Affairs, but in the free-for-all media environment in our country, I don't think that can ever present any point of view. Give a small connection narrative here on this issue of Ladakh. On 5th of August 2019, when this debate was going on in the Parliament, I happened to be somewhere where I was in a waiting room waiting for my turn to be called up there by a doctor actually. I saw the TV and they were presenting, the map of Jammu and Kashmir on this decision of the 370 and the Union territories coming up. So they presented the maps that were being projected was Jammu and Kashmir in one color, Ladakh in the second color, and the third color was Aksai. By chance, I noticed this. It was one of the Hindi TV news channels. So I had one of the officers who was with the ADG, the Public Information Group of the Army Headquarters. He had served with me as one of my staff officers earlier. So I rang him up and I said, "Why are you trying to indicate that Ladakh has a portion which is not under Ladakh and it is under China?" I said, "You got an opportunity here today to actually present quite clearly to the rest of the world that Aksai is part of Ladakh and there should be no doubt about it." He promptly took on this and told the news channel to change it. And thereafter, on that day, for that period, there were only two colors being shown on the map. One was Jammu and Kashmir including POK, and the other was Ladakh including Aksai. And I told him that since I had been with the joint working group and knew this issue of the India-China border major problem, I said this is going to irk the Chinese a lot, but that's how it should be. Let it be known. But why should it have been an individual like me who was a retired officer doing it? Why should it not have come from something from the official side, whether the MEA or the Army Headquarters? So we somehow let all these things pass very casually and we are not very particular about it, but it makes a lot of difference. So I was pretty amused to learn when recently there was this, what was being published as the SG, Srinivasan Group, which was an NGO from called the EU Disinformation Lab, when they unearthed and put out that there is a group in India which has been presenting and targeting Pakistan since 2005, and that the major player in this is the wire services, the ANI, and has been amplifying content which is produced on fake media outlets. In 2019, he says that this group uncovered 256 pro-Indian websites operating across 65 countries. If that is what we have achieved, I think that's a remarkable thing. If we are not aware of it, then we should propagate it. And if Chinese can do it that way, why should we be targeted? And there was a Pakistani author who put this article out in the Diplomat. So he was only focusing on that, that the arrangement of those EU members of Parliament, that visit was arranged by this Srinivasan group. Then however, he did not mention anything about China also being targeted by this group. However, the Chinese media, again I come to the Global Times, they chipped in and saying that this group has been targeting China also. So there's a Chinese scholar, Qing Fang, who is a director of Research Department of National Strategic Institute at the Tsinghua University. He goes on to say that India's political interests and the government's cyber security and intelligence service organizations are highly likely to be playing a major role behind the scenes. And he further says that the fake news sites created by the Srinivasan group have a long history with expertise, invisibility, deception and flexibility, and thus unlikely to be spontaneous civilian activity. It's very impressive if this is what is happening. And if it is not true, then it's sad that somebody else is doing it for us. Deng's policy of his 24 character strategy has been totally abandoned by Xi Jinping. Now Deng had very this 24 character strategy. To quote it, he says that observe calmly, secure our positions, cope with affairs calmly, hide our capabilities and bide our time, be good at maintaining a low profile, never claim leadership. China still doesn't claim leadership, but everything else is abandoned. It operates behind, I see China operating behind a facade where what they say is everything is diplomatically very correct, but what they do is quite opposite that. How is it that we have not been able to understand that why since 2013, whenever a senior official, the government official was visiting India, there was something happening on the LAC. In 2013, it was at Depsang, and the Prime Minister of China was visiting here, the Li Qingjing. 2014, it happened, and this impasse carried on for 14 days, the standoff. In 2014, it was Chumar and Demchok. It carried on for 21 days. And that is when Xi Jinping was visiting. And then it, of course, went into 2017, Doklam with 73 days. It is, our media gets focused on the issue that is happening on ground. There is nobody, the think tanks, those who are, China watchers, none of them have been able to, put their mind to it that why is this happening and why did they do it? Is there some link? Is there the strategic, the volume that the study of Chinese military strategy of 2013 brings out that they are actually working to a very a formula to enhance their reach everywhere, and we have not taken, we did a very superficial study of that, the study of military strategy of 2013. Another one came out in 2017. So our think tanks are not focusing and concentrating on these things, I think. Now, these actions in that show that everything is always coordinated. There are three warfares is very clear. And the three warfares is talking of the public opinion, whether it is their own opinion and the international community opinion. They create a narrative to ensure that everybody takes that one narrative as the final narrative or their narrative, and that narrative is true. And there is a psychological warfare which is always waged. And the third is illegal warfare. In fact, in this case of the Ladakh impasse, there are papers which are coming out from the Chinese Academy of Sciences and Social Studies, that now a new narrative is being created to bring out that the status of Ladakh as a territory of India is also questionable. So if they created that narrative in Arunachal Pradesh, they are doing that, a similar such narrative here in Ladakh. That historically, has Ladakh ever been part of India? And was it part of Tibet? So this is a new narrative which they are creating, and they are saying that now the issue of the LAC can be sidelined. The issue is not about LAC or the boundary; it is about the status of Ladakh. So they have created a situation which is going to turn the tables on us unless we are prepared for it. Now the PLA has always been part of the entire propaganda machinery of the CCP. When they came out with this, the three warfares, it was for a political and information pre-kinetic warfare strategy of the PLA. And it was introduced in 2003 when they revised the political works guidelines for the PLA. Earlier in Mao's time, there was a meeting which was held where Mao had, wanted to dispel the notions or the wrong notions that even his own Communist Party people had, when he said that they must understand that the Chinese army is an armed body of the party for carrying out the political tasks of the revolution. The Red Army fights not merely for the sake of fighting, but in order to help the masses establish revolutionary political power. So there should be no doubt that the government and the army are on the same page, and their actions are all coordinated in towards a very simple and straightforward narrative of projecting the CCP and protecting the CCP in power. The other aspect I just want to bring out is that our own media is being brought out. Even Colonel Hariharan had said that our media presence and Mr. Srinivasan also, that our media presence outside is not there. In fact, I had questioned the Doordarshan once on the PMO site that how much and what is our Doordarshan presence in the rest of the country? So the response was that we are projecting in 117 countries. The AIR is not effective. Like, why don't we have something like the BBC or the Voice of America in the old times, even on radio? So our media and our country has been actually always trying to please and appease the Chinese. Give an example when we talk of Tibet. In 2008, when the Olympic flame was passing through Delhi, the Chinese, in fact, had instructed India that make sure that there is no Tibetan people who are coming here and protesting while the flame is passing through Delhi. And we made sure that it has been that there was a total ban on any movement or action by the Tibetans. Similarly, during the Modi 1.0, at the swearing in, the Dalai Lama had been invited, but he was not invited for the swearing in Modi 2.0. Why was that? Because again it was Chinese pressure that time, and then the Chinese had again the 85th birthday of the Dalai Lama. Nobody wished him from the government side. So these are certain things that we've been trying to appease them, and they feel that they can pressurize us into doing what they want us to do. There is a security law, the National Security Law of 2015. The Article 2 in that defines the unlimited expense to what the party in China considers as a threat to it. They push and anything under that article and can say it's a threat to China. In 2006, the CMC judged that the PLA capability it is incompatible with winning local informatized wars, and therefore Hu Jintao included everybody into this other agencies into the entire format of narrative formation. Just for your information, I mean, I've been in touch right through this process of the impasse in Ladakh from May onwards with certain officials in the Chinese embassy, and they've been asking me and at times that why are you doing this and why not this, and Chinese have only done this. So I have been, and last communication with the gentleman was that he please very frankly say that what is the issue between India and China, and give it no holds barred. So I have done that with them. So I don't know if any other they've accessed or reached out to any other think tank or such body, but I gave them a very, very candid view of what I think about them and the Chinese and what they have done in Ladakh. I think I've exceeded my time of 15 minutes. Anything else that I can add to or through the questions are most welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. There are a couple of questions, but like I said earlier, we'll come to the questions at the end. I just want to, mention a couple of things, just comments or anecdotes, really. You mentioned about wrong maps. It's such a simple thing. Most Indian news media organizations, they have to depend on maps on foreign agencies, maps of India. If you want to get the authentic map from Survey of India, first you have to jump through 22 hoops. Second, it is very, very expensive. And third, they don't supply it in a format which is usable by the media. We need it as what are called vector graphics, which can be resized and manipulated, It's such a simple thing for the government to do. These maps should be available, official sanctioned maps should be available for free download on the PIB website for any media organization to use, because it's in your interest that you give the correct. Instead of which we actually, and quite often Western agencies do not follow the Indian stand on the boundary depiction, and then you will print the wrong map, and then the government will swing into action and come down like a ton of bricks on the media house, saying that there's actually a punishable, it's a criminal offense, and the editor is the one who's hauled up. So but we only react to certain things, and we don't actually bother fixing the problems. That's part of the problem. The other thing, I just wanted to mention that, the kind of long-term approach that China has from a media perspective on India is, in 2005, when I was national business editor of the Hindustan Times station in Mumbai, I was met by a delegation from Xinhua. They said they were journalists, editors, and they wanted to understand basically how the Indian financial system works, the stock markets, the banking system, and so on, because they said they wanted to set up a specialized financial bureau in Bombay, based in Bombay. And and they actually did it. They set up, I think, 2 or 3 dedicated this thing. Initially, the plan was to hire Indians, but I think they chickened out and they sent Chinese instead. But this is it. So they have a very good understanding of Indian financial systems, the markets, the companies, the listed companies, and so on. And they've been building the database. It's, that's the reason why Chinese have invested into most of the major Indian so-called unicorns, the technology startups, which are, hit billion-dollar valuations, and they've been powered by Chinese investments. And they have a very granular, detailed understanding of, not just political or this thing, but also the economic and other issues. And we simply do not invest any effort, resources, or money in trying to understand the Chinese perspective. So that, I think, is a problem. But I think we have the perfect person to talk about this much more, Professor Chengappa Bidanda, because he's been both a journalist and an academic scholar who's studied China. So I think over to you, Professor Chengappa.
Thanks, Srini. So, yeah, we are here today discussing the Chinese media landscape since the morning. What does that finally boil down to? We just had a lot of hostile incidents across the border and whatnot. So finally, what is it boiling down to? That India basically needs to fight an information war against China. I'll just quote President Xi Jinping's statement in February 2016, where he says, wherever there are readers, wherever there are viewers, that is where propaganda reports must extend their tentacles. Now, on the Indian side, is the political leadership or is the civilian leadership really thinking on these lines? I've got my serious doubts. I'll just take you back to since there are 2 army officers here, former DG Infantry and Colonel Hariharan Saab, who's been an Int Corps officer. 1986-87, Sumdrong Chu. What happened? I was just embarking on my PhD about a year or 2 later, and you couldn't make any sense out of Sumdrong Chu till I talked to former Eastern Army Commander General V.N. Sharma and whatnot. You can't. The political communication or the strategic communication on the part of the government of India was pathetic. And if you're trying to fight an information war against China, I logically and naturally would think the Indian Information Service, a very little known service in the government, should be at the forefront. Now, the Ministry of External Affairs, the true blue Indian Foreign Service officers like Ambassador Gautam Bambawale, they are fighting it. But what are their Indian Information Service officers posted in diplomatic missions with the intelligence establishment? What is their role? How do they understand it? I have seen during Kargil, outside the DGMI's office, there used to be a lot of journalists coming in. Well, the point is, why do you do it only in a crisis? Why can't you do it in peacetime? Fortunately, the Ministry of External Affairs, unlike the Ministry of Defense, has an external publicity cell, which is headed by a joint secretary level officer from the Foreign Service. But the Ministry of Defense has an Indian Information Service officer who is technically deaf and technically blind. He doesn't know any military matters. He won't give out any confidential stuff. So the army created its own, what later became, first it was under MI24 and then it became what is now, what public information. You had a ADG and a DDG and all that. Anyway, the point is, in this information war against China, we have to be audience centric. And what is our audience? Let me share one small thing. I attended the biggest ever seminar on India-China relations in 1991 February at Teen Murthy in Delhi, where the whole NDC course had come, and there were half a dozen retired former foreign secretaries. And one of them very candidly said, whenever the government is negotiating on the border dispute, the government is not negotiating with China. The government is negotiating with the domestic audience on how much to give away. I mean, this is the tragic state of affairs. Now, in this information war, who is going to lead? The interagency channels in the government of India between the Ministry of External Affairs, between the Indian Information Service and the intelligence establishment and the Indian Army is all very, very disparate. The Indian Army, I'm sure General Bajwa Saab and Colonel Hariharan Saab will bear me out. They are, I think, the Eastern Command, the Northern Command, and part of the Central Command deal with the Chinese border. Am I right? Now, then how do you sync that with the Indian Information Service and the Ministry of External Affairs? When you had Sundarong Chu, the kind of confusion that ensued was not funny. General Sharma has told me that, Sharma told me that if the Indian Army followed the MEA's instructions, there would have been chaos. They would have withdrawn up to the Brahmaputra. Anyway, now what is the way ahead? The topic for this panel is the way ahead. Now, I think the government of India needs to be very audience centric. And what would our audience here be? Our audience does not have to be China centric. Our audience has to be the other countries in Southeast Asia and in South Asia. I mean, this morning, Ambassador Bambawale mentioned India's reluctance to use the word alliance. Well, I find the concept of collective security is what alliance or coalition all boils down to. Collective security is the only way to tackle China. And how do you get the smaller Southeast Asian countries and the smaller South Asian countries on your side vis-a-vis China? Philippines says straight away, for instance, we can't handle China. The strategic stature of China is something beyond our capability, as much as India. Even the Indian Army is not too, from my understanding of things as a former military correspondent, the Indian Army is not too geared for mountain warfare, despite the mountain divisions and whatnot. An Army Headquarters Reserve Unit was moved in 2005-06 to the China border. This is one of those Army Headquarters units which otherwise is stationed in J&K, one of our couple of special forces units. The point is now, what is the message you have to give to the smaller countries of Southeast Asia and South Asia? That if you keep silent about China now, it's like what happened with the Hitler and the Nazis. If you keep silent, tomorrow, if they are eating into territory in Ladakh, tomorrow they will eat into your territory. So we all need to band together. Silence is not an option, or ignore the threat, because at some point the problem will become yours. The smaller countries should be told. Japan invaded China in the 1930s, and thereafter Japan invaded Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, and Malaysia and Myanmar subsequently. So this is a very collective security problem of dealing with China. For instance, how does the government of India amplify the message about Zambia in Africa? I'm talking about the second scramble for Africa, where China, India, and the other countries are trying to, garner resources. Zambia is now unable to pay back its debt to China and says, you go to hell, we are not paying the debt back. So how do India's soft power is all fine. People may like Bollywood movies, they may like Indian food and all that, but that is not going to endear them to India. India's infrastructure is not good, as one of the earlier Tilak Jha mentioned, Dr. Tilak Jha. We don't have anything good here. I mean, the infrastructure, if you look at Bangalore vis-a-vis Shanghai, some journalists who had come were laughing. They said Shanghai is somewhere else, Bangalore is somewhere else. To say Bangalore is India, Shanghai is an insult to Shanghai. I remember recently a retired army officer, a 72-year-old army officer, told me he went to China for a holiday. He came back so enamored with China. He said, it's such a fantastic country, and it's so nice and all that. So now the thing is, who in the government of India will take the lead? Obviously, you can't expect the private media to do this kind of thing. The private media is very profit oriented. It is how within the government of India, interagency channels swing into action to deal with the China problem. Like General Bajwa mentioned, the ANI story. That was a very, very impressive story. But I was also told by media professionals it was a very amateur attempt. It should have been far more slick. I mean, the Indian Information Service should measure up. Now, again, political messaging or political communication or strategic communication has its limitations. Finally, it is the product that sells. If India is an attractive investment destination, nothing will stop foreign direct investment into India. So this is an information war that India has to win vis-a-vis China. And for that, economic heft is necessary. Today, China has that economic heft. It's got the military heft. And what was India doing all these years? Even the road infrastructure along the border with China, India's the amount of money that India has put in there vis-a-vis the amount of money that China has put in there are two different stories. So collective security is the only way out to deal with the China problem. And in order to get more and more allies on your side and turn the tables against China, strategic communication is a crucial ingredient for this information war. On that note, I will end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Chengappa. I think, you raised some very, very important points out here. First and foremost, I think the need for greater professionalism, it's never in doubt, particularly on part of the government, equally so on part of the media itself in India. I think that there are severe challenges in terms of, also getting a mindset change. Like I said, in newsrooms, China is, because it's not a potential market for Indian media houses in any way. There are language issues, other regulatory breach issues. So it just doesn't interest. And I think that the people who are directly linked with the Chinese economy and who interact with it most closely, which actually in India lack a voice with the media, which is the MSME sector. If you look at it, they're the ones who are importing all this thing. They make some this thing, they make whatever components or finished products here. A lot of the inputs are from China, but it's not just a large organized sector, but lots of MSMEs who are involved. Likewise, the trader, we run a huge trade deficit with China, and so the people who have economic and other connections with China, they lack a voice. Media doesn't have, I think, it's not sufficient. Once in a while, when there's a crisis, yes, the government's propaganda machinery swings in, particularly with television, and there's a lot of noise, on the channels. And again, it's not a very professionally done job. It is so clearly, obviously orchestrated that nobody takes these things very seriously, and that's sort of self-defeating. If you want to, first of all, win your domestic audience, you need to also do a better job of that, a more professional job. And I think that there are ways to solving this. Very importantly, I think, media, we are fundamentally different from China in the sense that our media is largely privately owned and independent. but the government can do certain things to help. For instance, I think working out tax breaks for specific investments and news gathering directed at China might help. I mean, it might encourage certain news, organizations to sort of put some money into these things. It's so there are multiple options. So we'll just take a couple of questions. I would need some help from
Yes, sir.
yeah, Balat, in case somebody raises a hand and I can't see them on the screen. I have a couple of questions on the chat box. I'll take that from Mr. Seshadrivasan. He has a question for General Bajwa on your observations, sir, on how you had to intervene in the media narrative on Aksai Chen. And his question is, how can we ensure that there is a good media government interface as seen during the Kargil episode?
Let me just narrate another incident of 2013. The Debsang, the incursion and the ingress by the Chinese and the impasse that followed. One of these TV channels had come to me and took, I had just retired then, and they came and asked me a question, and I gave them what I thought should have happened, and the need for coordination there. The ITBP is there, the army is there, both are not. There's no coordination between the two in their operations. They function quite independently of each other. Till when one can't handle it, the other is asked to now take over. So, and there were certain restrictions which have been put. I took the, I mentioned the name of the China Study Group. And it so happened in Parliament, the defense minister had made a statement, and this interview was released just around that time, which was not in sync with what he said. So the oppositions had raised an issue. And by the evening, there was a letter to the army headquarters. Why should the officer not be charged under the Official Secrets Act for having used the word China Study Group? Now I see the China Study Group is bandied about everywhere, but there that time it was something you can't utter without having disclosed some state top secret element. So we must be clear. If you want to protect all information, then keep the media out and have your own newspaper or your own media cell which is going to issue a daily newspaper or a news. You give out your news report on television as an exclusive government channel, and that is what has happened. And it was a change that occurred in 1999, but this time in Ladakh, we don't have that concept of either embedded media, because as was done by the Americans in the Iraq war. So we still are, we take decisions which we don't want to disclose that we have taken such a decision. Give another example of this. In 1962, during the war, everything that transpired in the Ministry of Defense, nothing was recorded as minutes. It's something which history would always want to know, that whatever decisions were taken in any meetings at that level should have been made available to people in the years in later years. But here it was Krishna Menon who said that there will be no minutes of any meeting will be recorded. So we are trying to hide things, and if you want to, if you are not able to support a decision that you have taken and you want to be hiding these things, we will always have this problem of how much and what to tell the media. And till such time we have a very confident government, we are not going to be able to change this policy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Mr. Seshadrivasan has a hand raised again, I noticed. Anybody else has a... Is there anybody else?
Sir,
Yes?
sir, with your permission, there is a second question by Commodore Vasan, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
I
asked.
think I'll just mention it here itself because there's nobody else. Must thank Lieutenant General Bajwa for this first-hand inputs. My concerns still remain. You know, even after 60 years from 1962, nothing seems to have changed. There's only some hope when Kargil was covered because we used to have an MEA spokesperson coming there, you know, giving us a complete brief. It also happened after the attacks in, post Balwan. So, you know, there appear to be some kind of sharing of information and having a little more openness in this. But you know, you can't take on a country like China unless there is coordinated efforts by the NBA, the MOD, the IIF, which Professor Chandrappa brought out. Now, how are we going to bring these about? You know, unless the government of the day realizes the danger of continuing to be so defensive, I don't think we'll move forward. Any of the panelists can take this on and say, how can we change this? Because our effort is to try and change this, not that they don't know.
So the question is that we know the situation. How do we change the status quo? How can we get the government to change? General Bajwa, would you like to take it, or Colonel Hariharan? Yes, go ahead, sir.
You see, in 1971 war, when I participated, this information system was tied up with the media because I was one of the interface. It was very well organized. Before the operation started, everything was put in place. And that kind of approach, I don't understand why we cannot make it permanently. And every day a bulletin would come on what has happened in 71 war, what can be given to the public and what is cannot be given. Of course, future operations and so on. Because 1971 war was actually the ideally prepared war. I was in Sri Lanka also, which was a disaster. It is a study in contrast. This kind of information, I think we won the world audience because we had better interface with the media, international media, whereas Pakistan didn't have that. They didn't prepare. I think we failed to learn. This is where we should compliment Mrs. Indira Gandhi and General Sam Manekshaw. Both of them had very good. They had very good articulation with the media, both the local and international media. Mr. Modi is a very good communicator, but unfortunately, the media is somehow there is not even a media manager for the government, the cabinet. I think, if I am correct, I don't know who is the media manager. So I think we should change this mindset. It has to be a permanent thing. At that time, we didn't have a struggle with whether the army PRO. In those days, we had an army PRO. And he will do that or who will do this. This kind of thing didn't arise. There was we can organize it. I don't know, I was too junior. I was only a captain at that time. So I didn't understand the chain of command that went into organizing this. It was a very good example, I thought. And of course, in Sri Lanka also, I was thrust upon this thing on top of everything else. I cannot appear in public life there, but I had to deal with the media also. So it was anachronism anyway. I think
yes. So
Can I add a point, Mrs. Srinivasan? Can I?
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Let's take this example of the briefing to the political parties by the government in power, and that issue of that no territory has been lost in Ladakh. And all sorts of terminologies are being used that Chinese have captured, Chinese have intruded, Chinese have established a post, they have ingressed, they have transgressed. These are all the terms which are coming up. Now, since this LAC has not been, it's a ongoing discussion with the Chinese. The process has been ongoing. So, a statement which which should have been actually been more nuanced has been taken in a very different light and made a confusion of the whole issue. So therefore, when the media is to be told these things, they have to be told very clearly that what this term that you're using, why are you using this, and what implication does it have? So having dealt with, in fact, I think the word of transgression and transgression versus incursion, way back in 1998-99, I remember using it for the first time and said that it will not be an incursion, it's a transgression. And let us use this as a term that whenever our perception of the LAC, and that is all that a soldier needs to know on ground, that what is your LAC? It has been transgressed, it has been transgressed. You are not, a soldier on ground is not required to know what is the Chinese perception. That can be anything. You have to defend your task, which is your LAC will not be crossed by in any way. So this becomes a little nuanced, which is not very easily understood. So that statement was, something which went to the media, and the opposition parties created a ruckus about it, which was all unnecessary. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Heblikar, you had a hand raised. Is there a question?
Just a simple thought. One of the ideas of organizing this webinar or its predecessors, we had workshops and seminars, was aimed at journalists. And in the sense that the journalists could come to understand what is national security, what is strategy, what are India's national security objectives, interests, how is this achieved, and what is the environment around India's neighborhood, science and technology, and things like this. And I generally find that during the course of this four-part webinar, the representation from the media has been far and few. I think while all of us own the fact that we can criticize the government for continuing with some colonial approach to sharing information outside the government, but what is preventing the media houses or the media in trying to nominate its representatives to attend such kind of webinars? It is free of cost, it's complimentary. And I think in the last four webinars, we have seen over 100 speakers who have shared their experiences on a subject of national importance. Now there is a reference to the Indian Information Service. At the third webinar, I requested the DGPIB to have his representatives attend the webinar on cyber security as well as maritime. They spoke to the Chennai officer to send somebody. I think the result was 0. I think there is no interest. Thirdly, some of the terminology that have been used, as the general pointed out, or the colonel would say, have been vastly misunderstood. I remember Professor Chagapa talking to us some time back. He says how the army used to have journalists taken to various places in India for an on-the-spot briefing of a subject. I have served with the Indian Army for most part of my 38 years of service, right from Rajasthan to Mizoram and the neighboring countries. I think as an institution, the Army has much more that it shares with people. But does the media actually partake of what the Army offers? I think In our conversation in the last half an hour, the shoe was on the wrong foot. I think the media houses need to step up if they want to give India the kind of projection it requires. The MEA is well geared. People are area specialists. They are understood what they have done. In the Ministry of Defense, by virtue of their postings in various sectors, the army people understand what they're doing. So wise Air Force, Navy, and others. But if we are to talk about strategic issues, how many of the younger generation really understand what's up ahead? What is the trajectory that we are going to follow? I mean, this is what I would like to, place before my colleagues from the media who are on the platform today. I think there's a lot that the other side needs to do because the government is doing what it should be doing or it ought to be doing. That is my observation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think, a very well-made point. Something which I mentioned myself in both my opening remarks and other remarks through the course of the discussion, that one of the challenges is that there is, as far as China is concerned in particular, there is both a lack of understanding and a lack of internal expertise in media houses, and more importantly, a lack of interest. There is this thing. There is a tendency to sort of take the lowest common denominator approach in newsrooms. There is pressure on everybody, of course. The mass media game. You need numbers, but somehow the thinking seems to be that you have to sort of play to the gallery in order to reach the numbers, which is something which I've sort of disputed, but nevertheless, it exists. It cannot be wished away. More importantly, I think the media also needs, and the government also needs to do a little bit of pushing. I think the message, they're very good at it. This government in particular, it has absolutely no problems in controlling what kind of narrative goes out, particularly with the mass reach media and television and so on particular issues. So why can't it take this up also? And this thing you mentioned that media houses didn't really nominate anybody for a rich learning experience, but these are these kind of cost benefit analysis decisions which are being taken by news managers on a daily basis. I mean, if I have one reporter and I send him for sort of 8 hours for the seminar, what do I get out of it? Nothing. Just a better understanding for the reporter. They don't see that as a benefit. They'll say, if I deploy part of my limited resources somewhere for 4 hours or 8 hours, how many stories can I get? How much footage will I get? That's unfortunately that's a kind of this thing. In the old days, newsrooms had a number of really solid domain specialists, and they developed that expertise over years, maybe 20 years of doing the same beat, and they developed a deep understanding of it, and that's no longer the case anymore. So it's a reflective of a larger this thing. And in Indian media houses, we have not yet gone some of the Western way in terms of filling these gaps that you have, internal gaps that you have in expertise and understanding with crowdsourced but quality controlled stuff, like something like what, say, The Guardian does very successfully, where now outside contributors outnumber Guardian staffers by a good number. But there is a proper system of gatekeeping and quality control, which ensures that not everything, just simply gets by. So I think there are a number of things that we could look at in terms of coming up with some, solutions to the way forward from here. I think what is very, very clear to me is that the responsibility lies on both sides of the fence, whether it is the government has to do several things, whether it is the security establishment, they have to do certain things, and certainly the media has a lot of responsibility for this as well, if it indeed, because it indeed is a national interest prerogative, imperative. So thank you very much. I'd like to thank my panelists once again for their valuable inputs today. So thank you, and over to you, Shashi.
Shashi, can I just make a quick comment? A 30-second comment, 20-second comment.
Yeah, I'll time you.
Yeah, you can. See, I just wanted to respond to Mr. Hebliker's thing about media's responsibility versus the government's responsibility. I just wanted to flag the difference between state and market. Media is part of the market and it's not part of the state. But if state gives the direction, the media needs to cooperate. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, before Komodo Vedugopal takes over, does the honors. Thank you, Mr. Srinivasan, for first of all sparing your time to be here, being with us, I think, all through the day, also steering what has been a stimulating discussion, and if I can also add, ending it all on a rather high note. So thank you very much. Much appreciated. Yeah, Komodo.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for the goof up. On behalf of the Institute of Contemporary Studies, Bangalore, Press Trust of India, and Chennai Center for China Studies, it is my privilege to sum up the day's proceedings and convey the word of thanks. As you all agree, the media is one of the most powerful entity in today's world. It has the power to create and change public opinion with ease. It is far more powerful than the military or any other facet or dimension. They control public discussions, create opinions, change opinions, create sentiments, create realities. The media has the power to literally change societies if they wish to. It can be used as a propaganda machine and an instrument to persuade people into believing the originator's narrative by selective dissemination. Today's last of the series of this high-octane session has proved the importance of the media undoubtedly. I take this opportunity to thank the speakers for their brilliant and educative talk in the descending order. Professor M.D. Nalapat, Ms. Namrata Biji Ahuja, represented by Balasubramanian of the C3S, Professor Naresh Rao, Mr. Muralidharan Nair, Mr. Satyamurthy, Dr. Tilak Jha, Dr. Aijaz Wani, and these two sessions ably and brilliantly chaired by Mr. Pratap Hebliker and Dr. Chengappa. And lastly, the eminent panel chaired by Mr. Srinivasan, Raghavan Srinivasan, was an excellent closure to the day's proceedings. The panel consisted of Colonel Hariharan, General Bajwa, and Dr. Chengappa. A sincere thanks for the team behind the scene who have coordinated all activities and worked relentlessly to make this webinar a fantastic closure. A big thanks to Mr. Shashi Nair, Commodore Vasan, and Mr. Pratap Hebliker to have steered this interesting webinars through 4 rounds of sessions. Last but not the least, the audience who have actively participated in today's proceedings. I'll close my talk by signing off, wishing on behalf of the organizers of this webinar a very happy Merry Christmas, a very happy New Year, and a happy days ahead in 2021. Thank you, one and all.